as we're following some breaking news. This is just coming in here from the Associated Press. As we're learning, Disney and its ABC unit sued the Federal Communications Commission today to block an early review of licenses for 8 ABC stations, arguing the Trump administration is trying to punish the network over its broadcast content. President Trump has repeatedly urged broadcasters to drop comedy or news programs he dislikes or which have been critical, pressing the FCC on numerous occasions to revoke ABC's licenses. Now, in this lawsuit filed in U.S. District Court in Washington, Disney said the FCC was seeking to coerce and retaliate against, quote, a network that refuses to bow to the administration's demands. Disney and ABC asked the court to quickly issue a temporary restraining order halting the license renewal proceedings and preventing the FCC from scheduling a hearing. The company said the public comment period ended earlier this month and the FCC could act at any time. A bit more information here as we continue to follow this breaking news. The lawsuit alleges the administration is violating the company's First Amendment free speech rights. The lawsuit says, quote, again and again, the administration has attacked ABC's speech, the stories its journalists report, and the viewpoints its network programs air. Now, the White House did not immediately comment. We'll be checking social media here to see if we hear from President Trump or the White House. Now, FCC Chair Brendan Carr, who did not immediately comment today either, ordered the reviews in April, even though the station's license renewals were not scheduled to be considered before April of 2028. The FCC had not ordered an early review in more than 50 years before April. The reviews were ordered a day after President Trump urged ABC to fire late-night host Jimmy Kimmel. Broadcast stations need FCC licenses to use public airwaves. And while license revocations are extremely rare, critics say the threat of losing a license can pressure broadcasters and raise concerns about government interference in editorial and programming decisions. Networks have broad First Amendment protections over programming choices. President Trump called in November for the FCC to revoke ABC's licenses after he criticized an ABC News correspondent for asking Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince about the 2018 killing of a Washington Post columnist in a question he described as, quote, insubordinate. The FCC is also investigating ABC daytime talk show The View, which discusses U.S. politics, after saying it may be subject to federal rules requiring broadcasters to provide equal opportunities to political candidates. So this is just coming in here from the Associated Press, as well as Reuters, several other outlets saying breaking, Disney sues the FCC over the agency's challenge to broadcast licenses, claiming retaliation over Jimmy Kimmel, The View, and other shows.